Do, 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 do. Let me check whether we are live. Do, do, do. Okay, once again, welcome. Let's spend some moments connecting to each other again. This is the third time we're doing this. The first one, we were talking about the heroic crash cycles. We feel like we need to just make things very complicated and hard so that this path means something. And we were talking about how that actually could be a sign that you're not willing to let go of this identity of being someone who's, helpful, important, impressive, doing the right thing. All these subtle aspects that keep us looping on the path and not be able to fully integrate. And last week, we were having a conversation about the different dead ends, the different trappings that solo practice often end up at. Not everybody, but of course it's based on about 300 people we have worked with over the last 2 years, 3 years, but 2 years of doing bootcamps. We've seen these patterns plays out many times. The starting condition of how people enter a bootcamp, because really most online practitioners are solo practitioners. You don't really may have an in-person relationship with a communities, with a sangha in that way, and we have new materials that we can access to via YouTube like this or books on Amazon, and that leads to a new dynamic of practitioners that maybe 20 years ago this wasn't the case. So for today, let's talk about some solutions, because I don't want to just hammer down on negative points without deliver something that maybe can fix the situation. So we were talking about how last week we named the solo practitioners plateau, the 3 dead ends. We have a stubborn insistence that constantly trying to control our experience, how things should be. Or we have another dead end, which is kind of like a paranoid analysis, where you're constantly watching your own experience, you're trying to dissolve things, you're trying to crack these paradoxical, impossible Zen koans or something like that. Or you're trying to really peel away the layers and see what is really the self that's watching all the experience. And you realize that analysis never ends. There's going to be a self that watches the self that watches the self. And the observation continues. And a lot of that then leads to a type of surrendering, but it can become a kind of pathological, extreme type of surrendering when you abandon really all sort of any kind of agency. And in that way, it could be just never restabilize again, just kind of amputate away either conceptual thinking. You don't want to think anymore, you don't want to read anymore, you don't want to learn anymore, it's too tiring. I mean, I get it, right? This path sometimes can be so frustrating that by the time we come to the moment of surrendering, it feels like we just want to give up and ask for deliverance. And we may not see that actually our way of surrendering is also another form of overcorrections. That maybe we need to slow down, take stock of what we have been doing, and surrender some portion of it while redirecting our experience in other ways. And that's why it's getting to such an interesting topic of right effort. How much effort do we want to put in, that we don't, fetishize or pedestalizing this kind of flow state where we feel like if we put any sense of effort in, or we meet any sense of resistance, then somehow we're doing it wrong. Well, it may not be that we're doing anything wrong. It's just we have a better relationship with resistance. Resistance is also not a problem. Yeah, and then we're talking about once these different plateau is there, we just keep cycling through them instead of actually be able to break through. So today we'll go a layer deeper. What kind of practice moves you beyond this? And what we're saying in the title is deliberate practice. Right? Something that's structured, so it has a framework that you can rely on and replicate, that is personalized, So this framework actually adapts to your situation and not just some vague, generic things. And how can we cultivate feedback and friction, like real friction, not just in the ways of like we imagine stuff in our head. And in this way, I want to also break down how in CC, the 12-week bootcamp was developed through the last 2 years to solve these plateaus and design around this, and why we do what we do, essentially. So, okay, without further ado, I guess to it. So, I want to clarify a little bit more about why the need for this sort of structure may not be obvious. Because the default response after, like once we hit the ceiling, maybe we should want to add more. Maybe we feel like something is missing, so let's add more. So this could be adding new techniques. That's why I was kind of explaining about, modalities from, not modalities, but techniques going from insisting, sharpening your concentration, to now the technique about self-inquiry, to now the technique about letting go or surrendering. So we just feel like we need to add more of them. Maybe some variation of these 3 pillars. But really it's those 3 pillars in a lot of ways. Or maybe we feel like we need to add another modalities. This is actually being very legit. I was actually talking with a lot of people through these 2 weeks, because we having these slots for one-to-one coaching space. And shout out to all the people that watch these live stream and show up on there. I appreciate all the good words. But yeah, I was talking about at this stage, we actually do need to look for different type of modalities, because if we approach all these things purely from this kind of inside practice, we may realize that we lack a lot of therapeutic understanding or even skills to build a healthy psychological self. So working on our attachment issues, working through our traumas, or another dimension could be like our somatic capacity is very lacking. So we need to go to the gym, need to sign for a personal trainer, and all these modalities. It's very, very complementary and important to flesh it out. But after a while, after 5 years of adding new modalities, we're also kind of seeing like a diminishing return. Like, okay, all the pieces seems to be on the table. I got the psychological modern, modern psychology on how to cultivate a coherent narratives, healthy self-image, all those things is there. I've also got inside practice and knowing how to sit down and observe my own patterns and my phenomenon. I also, have done work to stay in my body and stay in body, but these things are really not clicking in that way, right? Or in this way, we may flip to another teacher, jump to another new tradition or lineage or things like that. And it does, it is genuine seeking, but yeah, the problem is then the seeking would never stop. It just, same mechanism just runs to another plateau, another plateau, another plateau. So really here at this point, I've talked to many people at this stage, and really this message goes out there to, after 5 to 7 years in, you got the quantity. You've probably done 3 retreats of various kind, you probably like practice on your own to a certain degree, you got the skills. So quantity is there, but there's not really that feedback structure, right? And then if we talk about at this point, right, about the feedback loop, it's necessary for all sort of elite skill development. Practice even sales call, right? Like if you're working in any sort of a sales industry, you know that you need to be drilled and have feedback. If you work in marketing, you need to look at metrics. If you work in sports, like for sure, you need to be able to get coaching and break down your strength, your weakness, points of development, and having all these kind of perspective that's from someone who knows you and worked through a long period of time with you. But so these deliberate practice properties, and we say that it needs to have well-defined goals. So very specific to know what has been missed and what needs to be corrected, and not to overcorrect things, or not, of course, not leaving a huge gap in our training. And the second thing is, how do we find immediate usable feedback? Not after months or like years, something that's happened, and you're just kind of like cycling through it and not really having ability to land that experience. I know like some of you guys have that opening after a psychedelic experience. Some of you guys have that after a retreat. And after, great openings, it could be great destabilization. You don't have somebody to talk to about it, recontextualize your experience, or just simply share space. And when you share with people that may give you some feedback, like your spouse, your friends around you, maybe even sometimes like even to your therapist or counselor, but they may not know the aspect of the this side of the path, so they can't give you feedback in that way. Or even I was talking to another person on the call that they have feedback, but it's too fleeting. It's like it's barely any. It's like 30 seconds a week to some online communities. And I was telling him like, yeah, I understand. Even though we have access now, but online communities usually have hundreds of students. So sometimes we can't blame the teacher in that way because they're very, very busy and there's too many students. And it's a whole, community management problem that every community now has to face. Otherwise, they'll get diluted. Yeah, and also deliberate practice, especially at this point, is to challenge just beyond your edge of current capacity. Because after a while, like we get complacent, the meditation skill is good, so why push further? I think I'm all right here. And we just stop, which is really unfortunate because, maybe it's just my opinion, but the reason why it could be unfortunate is there could be so much more, not necessarily more in the sense of like, you have to have it or something like that. But, talking to people that they know there's more work to be done, but there's also like these kind of comfort that they developed in their current situation. So it's almost kind of like a sunken cost fallacy, if you know what I mean. So it's like we're not willing to have that beginner's mind again. Kind of take too much pride on what has happened, and we don't see how that is actually blocking us from what could happen next. But oh well. If someone has that kind of perspective, it's very difficult to have a conversation and point anything out, right? Because it's really distilling. There's a degradation of the effectiveness of our practice. Because at this time, like if we're comparing to the deliberate practice models, we'll say that the goals get diffused, so it's just very vague. Things like, okay, deeper integration. What does that mean? More embodiment. All right. What does that mean? Like, this generate no corrective information. Like integration of what? If somebody who actually knows you, they may be pointing things like, okay, you have a problem of, say, inadequacy and the way that you would generate a more clear goal is that you need to allow yourself to feel embarrassed. That's a very particular, goal. So do things that would put you in a position of embarrassment. Of course, in a manageable manners. This would particularly be useful for someone who has a high spiritual ego, right? Because now if you know that, okay, all these things is puffing me up, I know I have a problem with my pride, this pointing out about embarrassment is necessary for me to, heal my formational wound, right? But usually it's too vague, like deeper integration or more embodiment. We could say like, okay, particularly, do you notice how when you sit, you often lean forward too much and you constantly rock yourself out? Like you notice that you don't have the ability to stay with the entirety of your experience, particularly the sense of open up of your chest. So then you notice that whenever you sit, things would collapse forward, and the somatic experience of this chest here, you're not allowing it to fully being hydrated with your energy, with your breath. That's a very particular type of pointing out. That's just not like more embodiment. You just feel your body. But like, okay, it's going to be very frustrating at this point if we don't have specific instruction in that way. And we were talking about feedback goes delayed, so patterns just keep on going. Recognition only arrives months later, and then we end up being not very efficient with our training. Or maybe never recognized, right? Especially if we were saying about like, we don't want to measure things, we want things to be diffuse, we want things to be vague, which is really a big problem. I have a bones to pick with people who wants to keep things vague, because I feel like people can hide under a lot of cool sounding word, but when it really goes like go into specific, people just crumble, So I have a problem with that. But anyway, so the feedback goes delay, and you may never actually be pointed out these things, and then you just wonder why relationships still don't work, or you're still stuck at something, because you don't see your pattern. But the challenge aspect is also very tricky, because I was also talking to someone and I tell him that, hey, your challenge right now is actually to be more gentle with yourself, because this person is hardcore, fasting, going into the wilderness by himself, all these rituals, and this is like he's put out his 8 years of doing this. It's like, actually at this point, doing more of that is your comfort zone. Now it's like, can you eat ice cream and watch whatever you want to watch and just chill out, and that's why like the challenge is so interesting, because we could just be so used to our own patterns, we don't see that we're just running the same stuff over and over again. Just this management. So the plateau here is not a sign really of exhausting the path. It's actually like, because sometimes we can go there and make a premature assessment. All right, let me talk more about this. And so we can go there and make the sense of like, I finished the path. And I know I made that, that kind of declaration before, feeling like reaching the end state and on that. And I mean, those openings are very, very convincing. But if we really being honest, and after a while, we see still how much we don't know about things, still so much is still like abstract and just things that we read about before, and we haven't really had direct experience yet, or if we do have a direct experience, it's not fully permeated into all the moments of our waking realities. And I think as practitioners, if we have humility and honesty, we'll see it pretty clearly that how much of it is the case right now for us. And a lot of these spaces, of these kind of live stream or our, upcoming boot camps and the one-on-one coaching space, a lot of it, I think, is to shine more light to this intimate connection. That perhaps before, while we're on the path, we have chip on our shoulder, we are excited about the possibilities of special, like extraordinary states and all this. But after a while, I think like we probably comes to realize that we were running away from our life. Like simple stuff, we're running away from that. And that could be very humbling, but also very relieving, because that means you get to be yourself, while also recognizing that what is yourself is an aggregation of, dependently arising components that is inherently empty. It's a very interesting thing. But to get to that point, first we spend a couple of years building skills, getting confident that if we sit down 30 minutes, we can produce a good state. We can turn the muck into a pleasant experience. We do that enough time, we'll gain the confidence that, okay, I want to do this. And then increasing the appetite for more difficult state. So now you actively lean into your shadow. You pull stuff up from even, you dare to go there, you dare to go into the recess of our mind when things are locked away and we never talk about it, those silent moments. And now we come to this point of like we're comfortable in ourselves enough. We don't have to, puff up, trying to deliver a wow factor. It's just coming as we are and then have a conversation with each other. Maybe show boasting and like being an influencer, and it's not to say no to that. It's not to say no to sharing the like telling a good story, sharing what awesome it is of this journey and all this. But after a while, it's get pretty tiring, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, but back to the show. I'm rambling now. So in terms of the structure of how we manage across the board of about 30, 40, now we have about 60 people that's training within CC. What's the structure he does? We kind of cook up a good pedagogy, like a curriculum that sometimes I am profoundly touched by the kind of sharing that's going on within CC. This kind of energy, people are really sincerely working to grow. They're not here to put on a show, they're not here to share highlight reels. They're not planning, to jump off the path or like looking to negotiate. Like, can it be done sooner or later? Can it be done earlier? Can it be done less time? Blah, blah, blah. Of course, like there's moments like that, and we get tired and we want to way out. But like day in, day out, people showing up, putting in the work. It's very inspiring. And it starts from we kind of just back to the basic, back to the foundation of the first 6 weeks. But in terms of foundation, I would say these things that we do in the first 6 weeks to stabilize our experience, we say it's foundational, but for some people, this is the entirety of the path already. I'm not even trying to be like cocky or arrogant about it, but I generally feel like, if you have the ability to stabilize your experience, to direct your attention, towards unfavorable inner condition, meaning like meeting anger, meeting grief, meeting sadness, meeting confusion, all the things that we usually would avoid, doing that to the point that you have a seizing of your perspective, your common perspective of the POV, that experience, and just allowing that process to happen, to recognize the totality of your being through the 5 area gates. That's like within the first 6 weeks. Of course, not everybody is expected to hit only jhanas and having a cessation in that way, but the game plan is there. Like, the structure support for that. And the reason why I think that it's such a interesting pedagogy that, we got a lot of instructors in CC. They observe this based on their own research, their own studies, and of course, throughout the people we're working with Mei Chang, with Taylor, who's really like the two instructors are building a lot of this. I started to see that, okay, if you can show people that going from somatic experience is the first touch point, like making contact with just your feelings, and not just a somatic experience as in your body, but just somatic experience of the field of contact. Like this experience right now, I'm making contact with you. I don't know who you are, but I can kind of feel you. And I think that as we're doing these live stream more, things soothe out more, and I feel more connected. So that part too, that's part of the somatic, that part of the feeling as well, sensation. And from that, stabilize towards moving to emotions. So feelings percolate into emotional state. So instead of just sensation, now it's become also a theme, like an emotional state of anger with a narrative, and all those things starting to have forms. And from that forms, you're starting to see that, formation, like how those forms coming together, the meaning making structure. And this is just the first 3 weeks to be able to see how you make sense of this moment, how these meanings of this is a live stream, this is a YouTube episode, and he's presenting these things so that I understand meditation better. Like all this framing, right now is just unconsciously, automatically booting up moment to moment for really the majority of us. But as we are provided the structure to see clear of our experience, these things starting to switch into a mode of I'm doing this. I'm choosing these meanings all the time. Right? And then once we're starting to see that, we have a container. Now the pressure is on. We stabilize with what is particularly is the difficult emotion to sit with us. And this will be very different from solo practice because number one, a lot of our practice may be all over the place and we actually don't know how to generate a container that can gather all of the different states that we have. Or when we're by ourselves, a lot of time we'll not sit with our full experience. If we feel shitty, we'll want to avoid feeling shitty and want to feel good. So we create separation. I think a lot of our Instagram posts has been clarifying this point about like how actually you can make meditation into a disassociate patterns, and you can use these techniques to avoid your life. Right? That's why Frank did multiple boot camps, 4 or 5 boot camps by this point. I did multiple boot camps, and we found that every time we go back to the basic, there's a deeper layers of just more subtle aspect of it. So we also not even in a rush. We just know that probably in a matter of 6 weeks, we'll gain more fitness, gain more capacity to be more with ourselves. It's an ongoing game. It's cultivation. We don't, your mastery goes on forever. And of course, without stabilization, like deconstruction wouldn't even work. We have people that actually just deconstruct what they already comfortable deconstructing. So actually there's no deconstruction. So the thing what am I? Oh, there's no self here anyway. That's not really deconstruction. That's just running a script over and over again. And it's pretty obvious from the outside looking at those kind of patterns and see okay, because there's no stabilization, that is just a script that this practitioner is trying to jam within their direct experience, but then they get frustrated because it wouldn't land, even though we feel like we got the right answer. And because it's not embodied yet, it's not account for all the different states of our being. So for stabilization to be really effective, it's also need to be very deliberate, meaning we have a well-defined goal, like we were saying, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like each week focus on one piece of that until it builds to the full stack. While doing this, receive feedback. Use this. All right, for Monday, we were sitting like this. Tomorrow, try this. Instead of leaning away from your sensation, don't try to choke your sensation until it disappears. Allow it to be. Like just one quick switch could save us, a whole trajectories that will cost us years if we never make that change. Yeah, and got pushed beyond our comfort zone just by the pacing of this. By the way, this is just also like good practice design that if you apply it to yourself or you find whatever teachers, whatever communities you got right now, you can apply and see it for yourself. With the current structure that I have, do I have clearly defined goals that I know how to measure myself against? It doesn't have to be like quantifiable, right? It can just be qualitative. I'm just like, do I feel like I'm more comfortable sitting with my anger, which is very uncomfortable now than I was 6 months ago, right? Then we have just kind of like a vague yes or no. It doesn't have to be like, measure into percentage. No, just well-defined, right? And then the feedback aspect of it, have I received feedback about my own patterns from my communities? And does it actually help me move forward? Right? Because there could be communities that, it's understandable when someone is very excited for deconstruction, that they just want to set up a container that, people go and deconstruct themselves and every feedback point to that. But maybe the feedback right now needs to be, hey, I need to calm my ass down, regulate my nervous system because I'm a wreck right now, and just slowly work it up. It doesn't have to be like bombastic. It could be gradual and sustainable, right? So see that, and does this community feel like they are very complacent, that they are very comfortable with where they're at? or are they continuously evolving, growing, and being part of a creative process? We can ask ourselves, right? So at this point, a lot of times we do have a container somewhat to stabilize in retreat and have openings because of that. But afterward, there's no real stable containers to land those openings. So then we're back to the cycle of, retain whatever we can from that opening and then need to do another retreat or ceremony or whatever to open it again. So that's why it takes some time to do that. Now, in terms of CC perspective, once there is that stabilization that happens, like reaching some sort of yogic capacity, being able to stay with your experience, now actually allow us to deconstruct. The difference is observing our pattern versus the pattern actually moving forward, actually changing. Because we can have a type that's called like intellectual deconstruction, understanding that the self is constructed, seeing the mechanism. It's one type of capacity. It's years of inquiry can build our ability to articulate, like to share and talk about our experience. But this type of observation, I've noticed from practitioners that read a lot, that, have a lot of journal a lot, doing therapeutic modality, so they can articulate very well. But it may still be unstable. It's very interesting. Like the core emotional wound may still be avoided throughout that process. And when it comes to this deconstruction phase, shout out to all that practitioners, because they're stepping in their own pressure chamber and like cook themselves. So it's not to diss their effort. It's to talk about the challenge of not falling into the trap of sophistry, which is like a lot of words, but fundamentally something is still missing. It's kind of like you can feel it, actually. You can feel when somebody's trying to impress you, trying to present themselves in a way that is kind of favorable, and then you're starting to see like, why this person keep describing their experience like that? Are they overcompensating for something? And like generally asking that question to not even shoot them down or anything, but to actually help them like, hey, I feel like you are doing this too much, and I feel like you're not sitting with your shame enough. Right? Because that potentially could be, a skillful response and a compassionate act for that person. What we have found out, though, is usually at this phase, when those kind of recommendation or suggestion is shared to people can freak out, man. Like when somebody really see us, we can freak out. I freaked out multiple times. Pretty much every cohort, I freaked out like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening again. When like a corner animal, like the side of us that just want to run away, knows that there's no more running away. Scary stuff, man. So, yeah, because otherwise, well, even if we are conscious of the pattern, it still may be running us. And that's what's so frustrating about this deconstruction phase, is that we have to see that we're still in a loop. We have to see that even though we can patch on a narration and like so-called understand it, we're still not liberated. We're still, bound down by all these habitual tendencies. So what breaks the pattern loose is at this phase, I would say it's quality friction from genuine relationship. Quality friction. Someone seeing you clearly enough that their perception lands differently than your own. This could potentially be, for example, let's take that example of someone who's worked with shame. At this phase, a genuine relationship and the friction can show up in a way of like, hey man, I love you. Like, there is love here. You don't have to be impressive to receive love. You, the person that with that shame cycle, would not believe it because they have built so much of their momentum to go in that direction of being, useful, can provide structure, provide insight, whatever. That may break them, to let that in. But it must require a real relationship. Or somebody else, this case is like, hey, enough pretense. You have to accept that you hate yourself. Now, if there's genuine relationship and you entertain that sort of feedback, what would that do to you? Like if it's a genuine friend, share that with you. After 6 weeks practicing and stabilizing our experience, so you know enough patterns already, and you're about to loop again of like, no, I don't have that problem. Oh, it's actually this, blah 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 blah. But then the friend slow you down, share with you that, and ask you to sit with it. I think this is the distinction that breaks us away from our loops, and that's why having these pointing out is so crucial. But of course, like we were saying, that usually we don't set up a container to get to this point because we may want to rush in to try to deconstruct. That's why I try to connect with people on the one-on-one coaching space, but if it's the first time I meet you, I can only share so much. I don't know you, If for someone, I met them 6 months ago, I share some feedback, but if 6 months later they haven't applied anything, I'll just tell them like, hey, just continue doing that, because otherwise we can't move forward. Just more of the same pattern is running. So to get to this point in the cohort, week 7, 8, and 9, they already been doing the work of just looking at their patterns, and now they're ready to receive the cut, because the piercing of cutting through the bullshit is very much the so-called vipassana, right? Like the insight that cut through, or building on that concentration and stabilization so that you can deliver this piercing clarity. Yeah, I may want to pause here a little bit and talk more about this experience, because this couples with being okay with looking at our patterns, with feeling the emotions that maybe the entire life we run away from, maybe questioning the narratives that we always believed in. Maybe sometimes the narrative actually, hey, like you deserve happiness. Like get that shit through your head. You deserve it. And like we don't, no, that's actually not true. I don't deserve it. Like having the stability and the trust in the other to entertain such possibility, instead of just going a massive cycle of building more things and going on more journey to finally be worthy of, so on and so forth. Yeah, but if we put in the work together, we'll get there together. Am I imagining, or are we getting more real with this live stream? I enjoy it. You feel it? All right. Back to the thing. So then afterwards, we got a phase called Reconstruction, which is right now is week 11. So the current cohort 8 is in this phase right now. It's really after all that deconstruction, looking at and accepting the cessation of a lot of parts of ourselves. After building up, the stability, creating the structure, container, all that. Now is in the phase, we can call it integration, but it's really like the power and the fitness to have a conscious rebirth. You decide what you means. That's pretty exciting. Because once the pattern is actually moved, like there is an opening now, it's not just looping again and again. There is a choice point. What are you going to do now? So reconstruction this way is choosing differently in the actual texture of your life. So at this point, of course, before that, there is on this, phase, the week 7, 8, and 9, there is spicy pointing out, people confronting their shadows. But week 10, 11, 12 is applying this in the context of your relationship, your work, your finance, whatever you find to be difficult. Can you prove to yourself that you have changed somewhat? It doesn't have to be, a complete shift and like you happy forever after. But I was having a conversation with a younger acolyte in our community that, hey, the insight now is actually your body has a lot of pain. You need to sit with it. That's the insight. That's how you reconstruct. That's your foundation. If you try to skip this, it would not go anywhere but bypassing. You already got the insight of what you need to sit with. Watch out for your mind that will try to negotiate its way out of actually doing the difficult work. Watch out for your patterns to try to negotiate something is more easy or whatever. No. Full embrace. You are you. You have your blessing. You have your skills. But you got your baggage. Whatever that baggage is, stay with it. So we're genuine turning towards actual life, not just another spiritual project in that way. Of course, it's still spiritual. Under the split between if so-called not spiritual is just somebody living in total suppression and not even know that they're depressed, and spiritual people are just someone who, look at the dukkha of life, then sure, this is spiritual. But I think at this point it's pretty much common sense. It's like common sense. Right. So then the job, the relationship, the money, the family tension, all is training ground. Not just a thing you tolerate while you build a path. Oh, I think there's some chat going on. Oh. Wait, moment. I'll see some chat. Yes, I can see our chat, but right now I think it's only 2 chat, so I don't think I'm missing anything. It's just this, right? Okay. Yep, I can see the chat. Yeah. All right. So back to this. So reconstruction, yeah, this phase. So for me, for example, I know that this phase, I just make clear priorities. That's what I'm about. And people are also clarifying, boundaries, what they stand for. For a lot of people, I think at this phase, the difficult things actually is to accept that spiritual insight don't fix your life in the way you think it will fix it. It could be really disappointing to accept that. Like really disappointing. If we start the path with somehow like some sort of fundamental question to avoid or to escape from our experience, at this point it's just going to be very disappointing, very disillusioned. Right? And people can also choose not to accept that. So why this phase is rarely completed? Because, people enter Reconstruction and never close it. They actually just have a blank canvas, but they never paint again. Either some nihilistic detachment settles in as comfort. They feel all right. They feel comfortable and things have unraveled. But, have these lingos around nothing matters, it's all empty anyway. They still can't generate a meaning that they can just be okay with. They're still kind of like just dissolving or just keep on unraveling. And I'm pretty worried in some ways about if this is a big trend. I think it's less now. I think there's a lot of wonderful work from many communicators that's also focused on, working with psychological health, not just, being in your bubble of individual liberation, actually seeing you interacting with others. But so many people can fall into this trap of just nihilism disguised as equanimity. Yeah, and especially there's also this veil to distinguish between, I'm a spiritual practitioner here, and like these people are like NPCs. But yeah, I was being mean last week. I'm like, bro, you are the spiritual NPC. You are as much NPC as them, because you can't go beyond your script. You're still trying to, like, scream out a narrative. So full integration is still not possible. And when you don't content with this, I think the path will slowly erodes away, and I think you even like end up worse than when you were before, because at least before you have ignorance as bliss. You don't know, so you kind of like save yourself from the horror of samsara, let's say. But now you have the sensibility, you are sensitive, you can feel into people, but you just kind of like can't do anything about it, which is not a good deal, man. Not a good deal. And that speaks to the last part, really. I would say about like the bloated ego problem, kind of like the other side. And I feel like I need to call this out, because really it's a touchy subject. But a lot of practitioners with genuine insight, but who haven't completed deconstruction, because there's still that ground that they are a spiritual practitioner. The identity of being an advanced practitioner becomes a new ground. So this is particularly hard to work with because it's built on real experience and real openings. So they have understanding, they have experience to share, they have capacity to do a lot of things that, normal people it's uncommon. But then it just become become a new position for you to cling on to. And you just got a big ass ego. So the tell is that not whether someone can articulate awakening, but whether they're still protecting a narrative and protecting their narrative. Like, like after I started the path, things will be like this. Right? And then a subtle accounting, like this person at this level, and I'm at this level. This tradition get this out, but like misses that, blah 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 blah. And then it becomes kind of like an ongoing assessment of who got it, who doesn't, which is like, I actually like shout out to a lot of people out there doing a really good, like I find really good job of defining definitions and to keep the integrity of tradition alive. But there could be some real problem with just keeping this at the back of your head and you can't turn it off. That's where it's going to be a problem. Like you yourself can't turn it off. It's one thing versus like, okay, I have a project that I want to clarify definitions, or I have a project that I will synthesize between different traditions and to highlight the commonalities, compare between definitions, versus like your ongoing experience living in a conceited pride. Like one is functional, you're providing like good materials for people to think about, and the other is like you live with the spiritual ego that cannot shut up. Yeah. So at this point, really I would say community as remedy. It's a remedy because it means regularly encountering with people who don't confirm your position, who see something you don't see, who respond to you differently than you expect. Like with this contrast come the friction. So when your identity started to be like ossified, starting to become like that strong-headedness, the response to that friction would then lean into like, oh, they don't understand me, they don't see me, blah, blah, blah. Or sometimes we would just like acknowledge, but like there's still that distance. Yes, I see that, I'm already working on it. But the spiritual ego may not be willing to be dissolved. Right? So the dissolution of the spiritual ego doesn't happen through more insight into spiritual ego. It happens through relationship, so that we'll see that, oh, if everybody's spiritual, then what's the point of carrying this narrative? So what would change when this work? I would say that there will be concrete texture, not just abstraction. But it's also difficult to mention these words about, like concrete versus abstraction, because sometimes we feel like, it's not abstract. That's my experience. I'm feeling this. But then that's very hard to convince someone that they are living in their head, that they're still in their head. Because Their narrative is, no, I'm not. I live in my body. I feel my body all the time. But like you intellectualize about your body is different from, embody. It's very difficult. But when stabilization and real deconstruction and genuine reconstruction come together, so in conflict with someone close, your spouse, your boss, your employee, you actually stay in it. You're not hovering above analyzing about like what's the self that's being triggered. No, you allow the trigger to happen, to unfold, for materials to come up. You become more real than real, more alive, especially when it's hard. Like it's like, oh no, like why am I still feeling this? Not a rhetorical question in a way of like, I should be over this by now because of how much I've been meditating. But no, why am I still feeling like this? I'm like, And there is illumination that is untouched by the stains and, the habitual tendency. But it starts to unravel and allow more liberation to be familiarized in this difficult experience, like genuine integration. It's starting to happen. Work feels different. So maybe your work doesn't change, like you don't even need to quit anything to go to the mountain or things like that. But because the split closed, and I think many people in CC is practicing with this. They're still continuing a 9 to 5, running the business, doing their thing, but they no longer see this as like separated from their on cushion meditation. Right? Less of that kind of like, oh, I wish I could be meditating right now. No, you know that meditation needs to produce a kind of equipoise when things are well calibrated, and you understand that once so-called life affliction flows again, you get destabilized. But that's part of the cycle. So then it's like this weaving in and out, working together. And challenge stop being obstacles to practice and start being the practice. It's just a different attitude towards welcoming a conscious struggle. Turning dukkha into sukha. And the cycling of determination, analysis, surrender, repeat loses its grip. Now there's an actual opening that allow, for you to accept, own up that part, and not being fooled into just running the cycles again and again. And that requires some mirror, and it makes the cycle visible as it's happening. So, closing this, and I'll get in maybe some space for some question afterwards, but I was just saying that if you hit the ceiling, serious practice or years, retreat still giving something, but it's kind of blurs together. I think what you likely need is the structure that gives you what solo practice structure cannot. Like in last week, we were talking about a lot of things solo practice can give us, but at this point, I think we need to find these things. And whether that is through a teacher that is around you, through CC or through whoever. But kind of structurally, we need to solve this somehow. The goals need to be well-defined. The feedback needs to be immediate and usable. And your environment should be able to give you relational friction that previously was invisible. So this is what CC is built around. And so in the description of this video, I'll post it later, but it will link to a 30 minutes conversation with one of CC mentor. That could be me, could be Frank, could be John, could be Tyson, but we're here to talk with you in more details and hopefully to make some connection. Okay, we still have some time for some question. I see. All right, let me read it out. Is this a post-completion path thing, or should the integration be when the practitioner is pre-stream entry, for example? I would say if we define stream entry here in a more like popular modern definition of there is an awakening experience where maybe your natural psychological self seen to be a thing that arises and pass away. You no longer doubt that the path is real, and you know that all what you do would be running away from this realization if you don't account for it. That'd be very different from the definition of stream entry from the sutta, of the original definition of the, like the self-view is obliterated, it's unfettered, doubt is no more, you see the Dharma, and, rites and rituals no longer has hold on you, and you recognize there could be a thing that is acausal. So it depends. I think it really depends. But I would say most of the practitioners that CC is talking to is 5 to 7 years into the path. And this is at the point that there are plenty of awakenings experiences already coming from, psychedelic ceremonies or usage on your own, coming from retreats, coming from just living your life, coming from on the cushions. But then we're starting to see that those moments are still very different from the rest of our living experience. We're still shrunk back. We're still unknowingly being unconscious, acting unskillfully. So those are more of like the territory we're talking about. Is there benefit to synthetic detachment a little bit when you are sleeves up practicing? There is a reason why we hear a story about meditation master isolating himself. Even Buddha left his family right and insulated himself. I would say 100%. I think we need to be able to isolate ourselves, and that's why the last live stream we were talking about the benefits of solo practice and how actually if we don't develop the capacity to really break apart from our immediate surroundings conventional pool, it's not even be able to possible to start a path. We must be able to willing to walk away, right? But this is more speak to Siddhartha Gautama. So he did his thing, right? He go out of his palace. He see old people, dying people. He see an ascetic monk, and then it clicks for him. Like, okay, all right, I got to do this. But I would say which moment was he in solitude? Because afterwards, he find the Brahmin teachers at the time to train and accomplish, the nothingness where everything is in flux, and the own oneness. That's one later on become the 7 jhana. The other master teach neither perception nor non-perception, but then they see that okay, in and out of those jhanic experience is still within samsara existence, it still arise, therefore it still pass away. There must be something beyond the cycle of rebirth. And then he practice ecstatic, which it feels like if the path is, I'm sorry, I'm just geeking out. I always appreciate a chance to tell the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, so bear with me, okay? But then afterwards, he's just training ecstatic, right? And he goes hardcore, he isolates himself, but he still have the 5 other people, the 5 other ecstatic, so he's not really alone. I think the moment he's genuinely alone is when he accepts that porridge from the girl after he nearly died while crossing the river. Because at that moment, his hardcore co-practitioner is like, oh, Siddhartha lost it. He's gone soft. I thought he's about it. I thought we're going to really do this together. I guess he just doesn't have it in him. That's the moment of isolation. But immediately after, he's like, okay, I want to do it now. I have no more options. Either I got it or I'm going to die. Well, I mean, that's a very hardcore thing to do if you feel gravitated towards that kind of extreme asceticism, which later on, Shakyamuni Buddha, when he, attains his realization, say like, okay, I did that so you don't have to, right? I did it so you don't have to. Don't do it like that. That was wrong view. But people, sometimes we can't help it. We need to exhaust some of that karma to want to prove it to ourselves that we can tough it out. And to see that the full extension of the will is still not released from the fundamental conceit. Because there is still that someone trying to finish the path. And the structure of illumination is that, you're not the one getting liberated. The you, the sense of the being, is not the one that getting liberated. The liberation comes from seeing that the identity structure, that the being arise in codependence with the environment, the other, the presence, the own that is. So the particularization and the dissolving into the universality, but that's beyond that's me geeking out. Sorry. I see you're speaking more in context of Plateau. think that makes sense. Yeah, this talk is really more about plateau of if you reach that point, if you tried all that makes sense, what's next? What tradition would this most likely map to? Well, of course, a lot of this we are based on the Buddha Dharma. And what I mean by Buddha Dharma, there is the aspect of the three turnings. The first turning is known as the, later on being doxed as the Hinayana, the small little tiny little path that you only care about your little self liberation. Oh, so small. But that's mean, right? That's being mean towards Theravadan. But no, like it's starting, take care of yourself first. Developing the skills to be able to sit down, doing anapanasati, watch your breath, doing this. But after a while, once you're starting to see the characteristic, you allow, like the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, you allow purification to happen. So yeah, that's deconstructions, allowing to arise through the different inside cycle, and then you popped. And I think for a lot of our people, which is we not really gravitate towards being a monk. Most likely we have relationships. Right, well, we have relationships, we have friends, families, we have our own children, we have a responsibility we need to carry out. We're not about the life of becoming monastic monks. So then we have to care for others, and that opens ourselves to, different dynamics, relational friction, like we were saying. So then that really maps to a lot of the dynamics that the Bodhisattvic path, trying to map out the framework. But of course, that is itself a whole shebang of problems itself as well, because now we talking about compassion. What does that should look like? Should you be a doormat? Like you must sacrifice yourself and martyrdom and all these things. But really, I would say the dynamic of quality friction relationship here is kind of like more like Vajrayana dynamics. Like Vajrayana dynamics of a genuine bond to someone. It's like, let's do this together. Now, in that tradition, they would be saying that to be, they would be contextualizing that with guru devotion. So you find a master, you go to that master and you receive the feedback and the instruction and you do it. But in CC, in this context, I think in the modern context, a lot of it is more peer-led. Of course, we still have a teacher that we are like the head instructors. They still teach and they still deliver learning points. But the way I'm talking to you right now is more like a peer. Like if you are about it, if you train hard, and if right now you want to finish the path, then let's do it together. Let's have a conversation. It's more of that attitude. But when we mean by friendship, it's not like that, like casual, just chit-chatty, oh, cool. But no, like take it serious as if a Vajrayana practitioner have a relationship with a guru. But I think that's pretty unusual. So that's why we're also trying to introduce these concepts and put it in a context why it solves the problem of solo practice. Because I think when we in the first year we start CC, we'll just accept it as like, this is going to be the case for the rest of our life. And sure, we are deepened, the states become more and more, mystical and more invisible, and we don't even talk about it anymore. But a lot of folks out there never really cross that chasm. Just feels like it's either like some people got it, some people don't. And just like, voila, whoop-de-doo. What to say? So answer the question again. Sorry, that's a long-winded way to answer the question of what tradition would this most likely map to. But most likely this would map to the three turnings of the Buddha Dharma. All right, I'm wrapping up now, but let me read out some of the comments as well. I found it very helpful to differentiate between moment-to-moment sensory level insight, which are the three characteristics, versus more global insight, integration. Yep, I'll say so. So that's still like, I think that's the reason why it's still very much a good idea to continue our formal practice, even when we feel like we already got the awakening. But it's just more so-called sensory level insight, just thorough due diligence, reps after reps, that allow the integration to sink deeper. Because one of the things that's like we may be fooled by is like our situation right now, we got it good, but that may not be the case forever. We, save up for the rainy days kind of mentality. But also like after a certain point, practice feels nice. It's really cool to sit down and investigate phenomena. It's just cool. Practice is cool, Like we're not even doing it to get more insight. We do it because it's a lifestyle. At some point though, I think I'm reading the chat. At some point though, I think to the sensory level inside gets so mature or needs to get so mature that it eats everything, including life situation. Yep, I think so. Yep, that's pretty much what we want to set up the meditation on-off cushion, allowing the inside to be familiarized into more and more of our life circumstance. So, okay, thank you guys for tuning in, and shout out, I don't know the names, I can't really pronounce the name. Thank you guys for all the chats. I look forward to next week. We do have some exciting announcement coming soon. Look out for that on our Instagram, which is Contemplative CrossFit. Look out for that. But in terms of the conversation this week, this is how we address the solution towards the plateau. And if this resonates with you, let's have a conversation. I'll leave the link in the description. You can check that out. For the time being, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope to see you soon.